If you watched part 1 in our series of videos on the interinstitutional accreditation test, you will by now be familiar with the format and the sequencing of the test. But you might still have some questions, such as how will my performance be evaluated? How does the jury arrive at its decision? What exactly are they looking for in a freelance interpreter? Or what goes on behind the scenes in the deliberation? In this video, part 2 in our series on the test, my colleague Owen Ward answers these questions by interviewing Anna Economides and Andy Hartley, two colleagues who have decades worth of experience of sitting on jury panels. It's worth bearing in mind that this interview was recorded a few years ago when the format and the sequencing of the test were a little different. But the advice and tips that they provide are just as relevant as ever.
So first question, I guess, what do you look for in candidates taking the accreditation test?
We're looking for a candidate who can show he or she has professional competence, that they're able in all circumstances to communicate clearly a coherent message in natural sounding mother tongue.
Perhaps if I could turn the question around and say something about what we're not looking for or what we're not expecting. We're not expecting perfection. And you've had your interpreter training, you know the basics, and what we are looking for is somebody who is ready to come and sit next to us in the booth as of tomorrow and work with us. But the skills that you've acquired at interpreting school will be honed further once you've started working.
And why is it that candidates tend to fail tests?
In consecutive, it's usually poor technique, perhaps they've not practiced it enough recently, and in simultaneous, it's often just lack of experience.
Often we see that the second language of a candidate is a bit weak. It's very rare that we see problems with mother tongue, but it's one of your 2 C languages that perhaps isn't always up to par. And the other reason, obviously, is nerves. People are nervous and they just don't perform and don't do justice to themselves.
That brings me on to my next question. It is a nerve-wracking occasion. How would you recommend that candidates manage their nerves?
Well, I would say first and foremost, don't forget we actually want to recruit freelance candidates. We want them to pass. This whole setup is geared to us recruiting more talent. So keep that in mind. This isn't a competition. Everyone who is good enough will actually pass.
I'd say, thinking back to when I did tests and competitions, don't treat it like an examination. Just treat it as an opportunity to show how you work normally. Regard it as a normal work assignment. You're there to show them what you can do.
Yeah, good advice. And how should candidates prepare for the accreditation test?
Practice, practice, practice. Especially practice your consecutive technique and make sure you're capable of doing a sustained simultaneous at some length. And then keep up with current affairs and also make sure that you know everything you need to know about the EU, because that's who you're going to work for.
Because often the consecutive speeches are on EU-related topics, and it doesn't look very good for a candidate if they come into an accreditation test with the EU institutions with great gaps in their EU knowledge. So they need to prepare thoroughly.
Okay, that brings me on to my next question again. What should candidates definitely not do during a test? Any no-nos?
First of all, you should not dry up and stop totally. You should keep going, whatever, show you can recover from a difficult situation, because real life in the booth is like that. Secondly, don't say anything stupid. I mean, we're ready to forgive omissions to a certain extent, but if you say something which is totally wrong or nonsensical, makes people burst out laughing, don't do that. And also, don't add anything which isn't in the original.
Yes. Make sure that you're always monitoring your output, precisely because of that, so that you know what you're saying and that you're in control of what you're saying. Don't lose control.
And obviously colleagues, future colleagues, don't always pass first time. What advice would you give to a candidate who fails the accreditation test?
Oh, I would say do not give up. Come back again. Many people do pass the second time round because by then they've gained more experience. And I think it would be a pity if you've invested so much time and effort to get trained as an interpreter and then you don't bother coming back a second time. Because after all, the institutions in Brussels are the biggest employer for interpreters, certainly in Europe. Way bigger an employer, I think, than the United Nations.
Yeah. Just the number of languages, the number of meetings, the number of colleagues.
Yeah, and we still test consecutive here at the EU. Some people say, well, we don't use consecutive very much. Why is it that we still test consecutive?
Well, we do use consecutive, and everybody's expected to be able to do it, and it can come up quite unexpectedly in a bilateral and other settings. So it is a job requirement. But also for us on the panel, it's a very good diagnostic tool. There are things which we can see more easily when it's not going past us at such a speed as in simultaneous. And then likewise, for the candidate, it's an opportunity to show just what they can do.
And that's why consecutive for us is also, as Andy said, a good diagnostic tool, because we can really see the communication skills of a candidate.
And talking about the jury itself, why are there so many people on the panel? It can be quite intimidating for candidates. Why are there so many people?
Well, first of all, it's interinstitutional, so we need people from all the institutions, which is usually 2 from the Commission, 2 from the Parliament and 1 from the Court. Then we need enough people to cover all the languages, and sometimes we're even more than the basic 5 because we need, for rarer languages, to get extra people in who understand it. And basically it's good to have several opinions to work together towards a consensus. Different people look out for different things. And one thing we do very specifically is to have one member of the jury who acts as a pure customer. He hasn't heard the original, doesn't understand the original, and in that way she can give genuine feedback as to, yeah, I could use that as a delegate, or no, it didn't make sense to me.
Are there any final words of wisdom, any final pieces of advice you would like to give our prospective candidates?
You've trained, you've even worked, you know how to do this job, just come and show us you can do it. We want talent, we want more people.
Yes, precisely. Just make sure that the nerves don't get the better of you and come in. And even if you don't get through the first time, this is still an experience. You know what to expect, you've been here, you've seen it, and you will come back next time better prepared. And do come back next time.